Hi, I'm Troy.
And I'm Vicky.
And we are Empty Nesters Wine. Well, welcome back. Episode 3 of our podcast for Empty Nesters Wine. Remodel Stories.
Oh, boy.
Told you last week about how we decided to do it ourselves with a major commercial remodel with no experience whatsoever. Fortunately, we had good friends that knew what they were doing. So yeah, we've experienced a lot in the last 2 years.
Quite the adventure, yeah.
For starters, okay, I'm afraid of heights. I don't like heights. I can be up on like a 1 story and look over the edge and I get the willies, man, and I have to back up. You remember when we went to Canyon City, Colorado, the Royal Gorge? And my brother talked me into going on this sky car. It's like this big car, big enclosed thing that runs along cables and goes over this giant canyon from one side to the other. It's transportation, so you can go to the other side and check out the sights over there.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I stood right in the middle of that cable car, and my brother kept saying, "Come over here and look out the window." I'm like, nope, I'm fine. So anyway, bucket list item, skydiving. I'll never cross that off of my list because I'm not jumping out of an airplane. No, I even if I told myself I was going to do it, I know me and how afraid of heights I am. If I got to the edge of that thing and looked out the door, I'd be like, nope.
Somebody would have to push him.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be easy because I'd be clinging on to anything I could. So anyway, if you haven't got the point, I'm afraid of heights. So guess who spent the majority of their time up on 3 levels of scaffolding, very tall ladders,
He's
painting
amazing.
ceilings. Yeah, that was me.
My hero.
So one level of scaffolding goes, what, 6-7 foot tall?
Something like that. I don't know. I've never measured it.
So I was up on 3 levels
Maybe
of scaffolding.
12?
So, well, if you stand up, 6 foot plus 6 foot.
I don't know.
So anyway, I bet I was probably 25 foot in the air on 3 levels of scaffolding. And I'm shaking so much that the whole scaffolding is just shaking back and forth. And I'm trying to paint the ceiling. So yeah, at that point, I was really questioning myself on doing it myself. But yeah.
Fortunately for us, we were already committed.
We were committed, and we need to be committed. So we called the county inspector because they have to buy off on everything that we do. And we were told it's a good idea to get an early, good relationship with them, show them the building, what you're planning on doing, and all this stuff. So this county inspector came out, and I showed her around. And remember I told you how terrible, in the last podcast episode, how terrible this building was. I showed her around, and she was nice, Oh, yeah, I know what you're saying. And, I was telling her our vision for the place, and she was all nice and laid out some things for me. Well, you're going to have to file this paperwork and do this and this. And then she goes back to the office, and a few days later, she called.
She called, and she had talked to her boss, and we ended up having to have this whole meeting in there because she didn't know how we were going to pull this thing off.
I had to have a special meeting with the county because she told her boss, this building is a disaster. It's about to fall down, and it's not safe to even be in there working, let alone remodel it. I mean, that's how bad it was. But they came out, and they looked at it, and they talked about it, and they talked to the architect, and the walls were sound, all 3 of them. and the roof was okay, but we did have to do a lot of repair on the ceiling part, or the rafters, whatever. But anyway, yeah, so that was pretty crazy right off the bat, man. We got the county inspector that does this for a living freaked out at the magnitude of the job that we've taken on.
Yeah. What did we get ourselves into?
So, starting at the bottom level, the basement. So we had this vision. Because there was already no floor, we decided we would just build 3/4 of a floor. And you'll have to come to our winery and look at it to see the layout. But we have like 3/4 of a floor, and then there's this big pit that looks down into the basement where we're going to make the wine, bottle the wine, and all that stuff. But
and there's a railing.
Yeah, so you won't fall in. So the basement was a mud floor, and there was these weird concrete pads.
Yeah, I don't know what the pads were about, but there was like a pad here and a pad there.
And they were deep, like 10 inches thick of concrete, just in different areas. And so starting at the beginning, man, we had to get that concrete out of there so we could pour a smooth concrete floor in the basement. So my brother Aaron came up, and we rented a jackhammer from a tool rental store in Lawrence. And we had to jackhammer out all these concrete pads. There was like 4 or 5 of them.
Something. I took my turn first.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
Vicky's pretty tough, and she does a lot of work, and she's good at what she does. But she thought she was pretty tough on this one.
No.
So we get her on the jackhammer. She jackhammered for like 10 seconds, and she's like, "Okay, I'm done."
Definitely.
So then I got on the jackhammer, and I ran it for maybe a couple minutes max, and I was like, "This sucks, man. This is terrible." But my little brother Aaron, man, he stepped in and he busted all that stuff up, and Vicky and I was carting it out and throwing it in the back of our truck, haul it away. And that was only the beginning. We had this tiny little doorway to the basement. We had a company come in and pour the concrete floor. It was pretty interesting how they did it.
Yeah, they had to bring in this like little itty bitty excavator thing. They had to bring it in 2 pieces.
Yeah, what'd they call it? A coyote or a jackal?
Dingo?
Dingo.
Dingo.
Yeah, it was a dingo.
Yeah. It was a dingo. They brought it in 2 pieces, and the guy would scoop out the soil, put it into this wheelbarrow, and this other guy would wheel the wheelbarrow when it got full onto this
over to a
conveyor belt that was going up the stairs and out the door to a they had a bobcat parked right at the end of it, and it would run the soil right out to it. So
and then when they put the concrete in, they had to run it through this big old long tube. So yeah, it was pretty interesting though. So, yeah, and then there was painting the ceiling.
Well, first, before painting the ceiling, was all of the demolishing things. We had to get rid of that big wall section.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And that was an interesting... Well, we had this whole big work party where people were tearing things apart and taking it out to the trash and...
So this wall was running across the middle of the building, and it was like, what is that? What do they call that? Slat and plaster or whatever?
Lattice and something. Yeah, I don't know.
Whatever it is, it was a bunch of concrete and wood and horsehair insulation.
It was cedar insulation.
Well, cedar, whatever it was. So, if you pull down a little chunk of this wall, this insulation just flies all over in the air, and it was a disaster. So again, my brother, fearless, Aaron.
Definitely fearless.
He got up there with a jigsaw, I think.
A jigsaw.
And he strategically cut in areas to where it didn't fall until he was ready for it to fall. Then he went to one spot, and all he had to do was just hit this one little spot with the jigsaw, and the whole freaking wall just crashed in around him.
Then the dust from all that cedar flew up in this huge cloud, and everybody's looking like, Aaron. Where did Aaron go?
Is he alive?
Is he alive?
Did he fall in? Did he get smashed? What?
But he emerged just fine.
Yeah, he was all right. Yeah, so then we after that, we had to rip up what floor was there and redo the floor.
And the floor joists, they had to do all those.
We had my friend Bo helping with all that stuff, and we were downstairs again. Me, Troy, doing it yourself job. It's not for me. We were downstairs, and Bo had these 2x4s. All like there was like 10 of them. We had like columns and then 2x4s running across. It was like all framed out so that we could put in the floor. And then Bo says, "Hey, hold this up for me." And apparently, I mean, it was like this big thing. But, you know, one 2x4, if you just have to hold one 2x4 and put some pressure against it to keep it all up. And apparently I could have pushed any of 3 directions to keep it up, and I pushed the other direction. It just crashed down around us. It was like dominoes, man. All these 2x4s just falling in around us. And Bo and his employee Steve just looked at me, and they just started laughing. That was probably 2 hours worth of work.
Oh, probably.
And we had to start all over again. So yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, after we got the floor put in, we were putting down all the plywood.
Yeah.
And Bo asked me to cut a piece of plywood, and I said, "Are you sure you know what you're doing here? I don't cut stuff." He told me it'll be okay. Whatever you do, I can fix it. And so that gave me a lot of confidence right there. So what really got me was he said, "Whatever you can do, I can fix," and then he couldn't even fix what I did. So yeah, I cut this piece of plywood and it didn't fit right because it was too short on one end, too long on the other end, and yeah, it was a mess. So that was a $20 piece of plywood we had to throw away.
Probably $10.
Whatever it was. So we get the floor up, and the back door, there's probably a 3.5 foot drop from the back door to the outside. We've since built a deck out there, but there in the beginning there was nothing. And so my brother and I are standing outside the doorway, and it's like 3.5 foot up into the door. And my brother, the retired Special Forces Army guy who's all tough and fearless, good at what he does, fearless. He climbs trees to chop off a limb. Yeah, he's pretty tough, and he knows he's tough, and he's pretty proud of himself sometimes. So anyway, his older brother standing there flat-footed, and I jumped straight up in the air and jumped into the doorway. And so
he wasn't about to be outdone.
Yeah, he wasn't going to be outdone. So he's like, "Well, I can do that too." So he stood there and he tried to jump in the doorway, and he didn't make it. And he hurt his hip. He spent the whole weekend limping around the place complaining about it. It was great for me to see because he always outdoes me with everything. Not that time. If you're listening to this, Aaron, I love you. I didn't mean anything by it. But I still beat you.
We did have a bat that was living in there at one point. I don't know whatever happened to that bat. I told him he could come live in one of our bat boxes out in the creek.
We lived 2.5 blocks from the winery, so yeah, we wouldn't mind moving him so he could eat the mosquitoes around the house. But yeah, we were just in there working one day, and this bat just comes flying around. It was like, oh my gosh. And then he disappeared. I guess he decided it was getting too crowded there, so he moved. Yeah. He didn't move to our house, though. So, what else? Man.
Oh, you guys moving that beam. Ooh. That was pretty crazy.
Yeah, so if you come in our winery, you'll see this giant beam. Are you talking about the one we installed or the one that we moved?
Both of them, actually.
Yeah, there was a beam already in there in the back, which is way up high because there's no first floor. It's just from the basement up. And so here I am again on 3 levels of scaffolding. and we had to move this beam over about 1.5 feet. So it'd be
probably
where the
3
footings
feet.
were poured. Okay, 3 feet. It was a big, heavy beam. There was 4 of us that moved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had another beam, kind of a cool looking decorative beam that's up front. And yeah, that thing was heavy. We had to put it in 3 stages. It's 3, what is that, 2x12s?
No, they're 18 inches.
18
and
inch
I think
wide.
They're 3 inches wide.
Yeah, and they're really long. So like 20 foot long or something.
Something like that.
So anyway, yeah, we had all hands on deck for that one, moving that in. That was that was quite a heavy one. And then, just a lot of stuff, framing, putting up sheetrock. So we called this guy to put up sheetrock, and what was his name?
What was his name? I can't remember.
Oh, shoot. Tim,
yeah.
Tim, the sheetrock guy. He comes in. He's a big fella. Like, he's tall and stocky guy.
Reminded me of Trace Adkins.
Trace Adkins. Looked just like the guy. Long hair. I mean, it looked just like him. So he comes in and works alone, and he's fast, and he's cheap, and he's good. And he came in.
I can't believe he got it done in the time that he got it done by himself.
Yeah, what was it, like 3 or 4 days?
Yeah.
He hung all the sheetrock in the whole place.
Even up really high.
Yeah, really high. I mean, and he had sheetrock. What was that long stuff? 12 foot long?
16-footer.
16 foot long sheetrock. I don't know how he even handled it on his own. He's a big fella, but wow. Yeah, and he was a real nice guy. Tim, I don't remember his last name, but he does sheetrock out of Topeka, I think. Great guy. So then after we, here's the good part of the story. After we got the sheetrock hung.
Oh, before the sheetrock. Huh?
We did, what?
You're talking about the insulation?
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. So I hate insulation. Oh, man, it's so itchy and terrible. I don't like messing with it at all. I was not looking forward to hanging all this insulation. But we had to insulate the bathrooms before Tim hung the sheetrock. So, what happens in bathrooms. You don't need any errant pee noises or anything while people are trying to enjoy their wine. So, anyway, we got all this insulation, and I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't excited about doing that at all. So I go to work one day. Tim calls and says, hey, I can come and start that sheetrock tonight or tomorrow, whatever it was. And he was like, oh, my goodness. Okay, so I texted Vicky, and I told her that Tim was coming soon to do the sheetrock. And I get home from work, and she's hung all the insulation in the whole place.
By myself.
Sweet. So I didn't have to mess with the insulation. So, yeah. So after the insulation was hung, we decided we would tape and mud everything ourselves.
Yeah, that didn't last long.
I've done taping and mudding in the past with my dad, and I think I could do it, but it would not be easy, and it would be a long job. And the more I thought about it, I contacted a good friend of mine who actually helped with the framing on the winery, Steve Yates. His son, Chris, actually does taping and mudding for a living, and he said, hey, I could do it as a side job, and he gave us a quote that was pretty good, really. Taped, mudded, textured, the whole works.
We went on vacation, came back, and it was done.
Yeah, so we went on an Alaskan cruise, came home, and tape and mudding was done. So that's my kind of construction work right there. So let's see, what else?
Probably.
Oh, so, this job originally, the contractor said $150,000, 3 months, you'll be ready to roll. This has taken us so long that the county gives us a building permit and the city gives us a building permit. The county actually called the city and said, hey, are these guys still doing anything over there? Do we need to just close this building permit? It's been so long. So, no, She knows us. She says, no, they're doing it themselves. They're still working on it. I see progress.
She says, keep it going as long as it needs to.
Keep it open. How about when we had the insulation done on the ceiling?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that was quite a mess, man. It dripped all over the floor and
yeah,
everything.
The guy told us he was gonna come in, have it done. It would take like a couple of days, and he was gonna paint it and do it the color we wanted, and that he would have it all cleaned up. That we wouldn't have anything on the floor, wouldn't have anything on anything else. Now.
I thought, yeah, kind of like a taping and mudding thing. I'm going to leave for a week, come back, and he'll be done. Oh, no.
No, that was a mess. It took him...
took him 3 times as long as he said it would.
Yeah, and he complained the entire time.
And then he was supposed to paint a certain color, the ceiling, and he didn't do it. So we had to paint it.
He ended up having to get this one paint that cost 3 times the amount that he said it was going to cost. And then still had to paint it,
it was like
on top of that ourselves.
Light colored. But we made it through that. We got it painted.
I ended up pretty speckled by the time it was all said and done.
Yeah, it was so funny. Vicky coming home with just blue specks all over her face. We had to get a what is
paint
that
sprayer.
called? Paint sprayer, yeah, and put the paint in there and just spray it over the top of the insulation. But it looks pretty good now. I was pretty concerned because it looked terrible before we painted it, and the whole idea was to paint it a dark color so it would just kind of blend in up there. No one would really see how ugly the spraying insulation is. So, yeah, and then, we had a mason come in, and the mason did not do very well, and that got Vicky going. And next week on our podcast, we'll tell you all about Vicky the Mason and how amazing she is and how this all came about. Guys, I forgot to mention, but like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to try to put out an episode every week. We might get some videos up at some point. And once we get open, we're going to do some really cool stuff that you want to be a part of. So next week, we're going to continue remodel stories. And we'll tell you about Vicky's awesome feature wall and her masonry skills. In the meantime, we're going to sit here and drink some Empty Nesters Concord wine.
Cheers.
Cheers.